Oh my
Welcome
God.
and hello to the Gooners podcast, episode 7, season 7, episode 6. Tonight we're chuffed to welcome an incredible talent, a wizard with the guitar, a lyrical genius. We're going to talk to Andrew Allen about his annual Christmas show, his semi-annual Rosh Hashanah show, his hit songs All Hearts Stay Home, and how he got his start playing bar mitzvahs in Golders Green. You'll want to hear what this musical maestro has to say, so please stay tuned for the Gooners podcast.
Once upon a time, way back when there were only 9,000 Arsenal podcasts, 5 young men from various backgrounds, an Irish kid with a horrible haircut, a young Jewish nerd who hadn't discovered food yet, a child from Hemel Hempstead who didn't want to be English no more, a handsome advertising magnate with impeccable judgment, and a young Mexican AC Milan fan hatched a plan to take over the world of Arsenal podcasts. But then these boys became men. Jared, Mikey, Ewan, Magic, and Andy. And the rest, my friends, is history. And now, all these years later, you tune in every so often to hear their incredible takes, their football knowledge, and their sensual advice. But now, it's gone too far. You, our fans, are at long last witness to season
7.
Welcome to the Gooners Pod.
We're almost done. You're 2 minutes closer to being done than you thought we would be when we started. Did I invite the wrong musician on this podcast? I mean, I think I might have made a mistake.
There's also an Andrew Allen who's an astronaut. I'm surprised you didn't get him on.
You know, I mean, I'm going for all Andrews and all Andrew Allens this week as far as I can do it. But this is the segment of the podcast where we generously offer our guests the opportunity to bail out. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
I'm gonna stand firm. I'm gonna hold the line. I'm not
Nice.
gonna bail. Not yet.
I knew you were a real man. So it's been a while since we've had a duck breaking appearance on our pod, but I'm excited to break someone else's duck tonight. And that's the last of like the little cheap videos I have to say. Tonight we welcome in a man who's very good timing, whose initials make me want to stop drinking. In fact, I'm the one that's not drinking tonight in the twist of fate. A chap who I had finally had the pleasure of meeting in a place I definitely did not belong, a church, about a month ago. I mean, I was walking around with a sign basically that said Jew on it, but he's a deputy editor. I'm having trouble reading my own material today.
Okay, we need to get you a drink.
Yes, a deputy editor of some little niche website called Arseblog News or something like that. You can hear him on the Arscast Extra. You can even hear him right now on the Gooners Pod if I ever would stop talking. I'm hearing great things about that website that you work on. It's an up and coming thing, huh?
It's all right. Yeah, the manager's a bit of a pain in the ass, but otherwise it's doing okay. It seems to have sort of taken on a bit of a life of its own over the course of the last 10, 11 years now. Yeah,
as per usual, you know, management tends to get in your way, but welcome.
Yeah, he's a huge micromanager, that Mangan guy. Yeah, he's always kind of on at me. As soon as I'm, late to the office, he's sort of where's the next 500 words on Fabio Vieira or what have you. So
Well, and I've seen ever since the news dropped, everybody's been very busy. Like little gerbils and hamsters getting down to business with the new signing, which is nice to get. And we'll certainly talk a little bit more about Vieira since it's been 15 years or so since we've spoken about him. But we discussed earlier today the appropriate attire for the podcast, and while I can't see, I'm assuming that you went with the Atlas Chaps.
Yeah, the Atlas Chaps are on. Unfortunately, the camera will only go to kind of around this area, but. Maybe there'll be a private show later. And,
we actually have the reverse cam installed normally in our people's house. That's why it took so long to invite you on the podcast, because it was a little tricky. The egress and to your flat and to your home is.
I tend to save, the Arseless Chaps for the Patreon stuff, for the paying customers. I don't want to give it away for free.
Have I ever shown you our Patreon? I need to show you this because you guys gave us such a good idea when Andrew started doing the Patreon and when Elliot started doing it, and it's been a while since we showed it on the show. So we do have a Patreon. We're still waiting for our first subscriber, and I can't possibly for the life of me figure out why. Let me. Why can I not? Oh, here we go. You tell me if you notice anything that might lead to us not being able to get subscribers. I mean,
wow,
what we offer for the price, I think is really special, Andrew. I mean, it's just I mean, it's under $1,000 a month, and it's the entry level, where you get the ability to listen or watch the podcast and ask a question per month, not per show. Don't get greedy.
I'm not interested in the lower level. I mean, the screen's too small for me to tell what's on the T-shirt. But what is on the T-shirt? The $10,000 a month.
I think the T-shirt says like the Gooners pod.
Oh right. Okay.
I mean, I don't remember.
Hugely disappointing.
Yeah, my co-founder actually, Andy Rhodes, who we never see on here anymore. He's the boy from Hemel Hempstead that doesn't want to be English no more. He designed the T-shirt, so let me see if I can zoom in on that because it's really it's a work of art, and I cannot zoom in on it. Now I've screwed up this whole bit, but yeah, it's a great T-shirt. But for $10,000 a month, you get your choice of me or Andy, not to watch on. You get your full access, which includes late night texts of you up. Now you guys don't do this, and I think
we really don't. We're missing a trick here.
I think it's really, really lame that you guys charge people and you don't text them the score of the Arsenal games once they go final. I mean, you have a bunch of listeners who are waiting now until the Monday morning podcast to find out what happened, and it's
ridiculous.
It is.
I'm just going to make some notes because Andrew might be doing something else rather than watching me badmouth him live. So. Oh, So we need to text people the results at the end of the games and better T-shirts. T-shirts.
Yeah, the T-shirts you stole from us, but the texting after the game. I mean, we find that people want to know before the podcast comes out on Monday, and it's brutal that you guys don't do that.
Tell me more about the "you up" texts. How many of those do I get for the $10,000 a month?
I tend to keep fairly late hours. And so I'm often awake when English listeners would be at their horniest. So you get a text from the real Mike from the Gooners pod, which not someone I hired to do the job. You get that, and if you're up, you never know what's going to happen. I mean, you might get a pick.
Might is not going to do it for me. Not at $10,000 a month. I need definite knowledge that there's going to be Arseless Chaps in those picks. And
the $10,000 a month is for the person that would normally have paid $25, but because there's really not a whole lot of guarantees, they're happy just to spend the $10. You get monthly signed 8x10s. Here's some more late night texts that you get. You get all the things from the other categories and compliments.
Compliments.
We've been giving compliments out lately to people who aren't signed up for our Patreon, and I just got to tell you, people, that's going to stop because we really need to drive more traffic to our, these trips to London are not going to pay for themselves. So they're just not, and I'm going to stop paying for them, and so they're just not going to happen. So. You're welcome, London. So enough about our Patreon. I just thought that it'd been a while since we brought it up, and we're trying to get membership. Gooners versus Cancer, that's all cool. But if you got $10,000 to spare, go to the Patreon. So, do you do much on-camera stuff? I mean, it isn't really that easy to find a ton of pictures of you online, and maybe
I figured that when I saw the Photoshop in my head. No, I've not done a huge amount of video. There's like one. Interview. Weirdly, me and Mikel Arteta, when he was at Arsenal, there's an interview I did with him on YouTube under the Arseblog banner, and that I get torn to pieces by by friends. At the end of the night, they'll put that on because I just look incredibly awkward on camera, and I think that basically did for me and my confidence. So yeah, I tend to stay off the camera. To be fair, like Andrew's not massive on camera stuff either. But yeah, I mean, it's good to dabble sometimes. Who knows? Maybe I'll get a taste for it.
Well, I appreciate you making the exception for me. I mean, you certainly have, the grooming that I don't, the regular shaped head that I don't, and it's nice to have some balance.
These are the free compliments you were talking about, isn't it?
Yes. I'm as part of your wage packet, I've given you the things that we normally put on our Patreon, but it's just for this month, though.
I get the feeling by the end of this hour, I'll be able to get a "you up" text out of you for free as well. We'll see.
You could probably squeeze one out of me. So, if you've got user questions, if you're in the chat, we call our listeners users because we're a full service show. So for the literal tens of you that are in the chat, if you have anything you want to ask Andrew, put it in the chat right now. Start it with a Q so that I can pick it out later, and we'll ask Andrew some questions that are not as dumb and ridiculous as the ones that I've come up with. So anytime we have someone that hasn't been on our pod before, we want to try to get a little bit of background knowledge about why Arsenal, how did it start for you, and I've read that it's a family thing and it was really from birth, but tell us a little bit about your early memories, kind of how Arsenal became your, not just your football team, but your focus.
It's no surprise. I mean, it really was a family thing. My dad was a season ticket holder. My grandfather had a season ticket. My uncle had a season ticket, and that was from two sides of the family. So, there were no real choices when I was a youngster, but I mean, it didn't take very long for me to kind of fall in love with the game anyway. Like, I was just a massive football fan from the moment I was a kid, and I was given a ball, and I loved running around and playing football, and getting to go to matches. I think I don't even remember the first, but it was like 1987 or something, and I was about 4.
Not a bad time to kind of start.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, the first year I really sort of have proper memories was the 1991 season when we won the league, and I do remember watching Anfield 89, but it's one of those things where you watch the highlights over and over again, and you read Fever Pitch over and over again, and you start to question what's an actual memory and what have you kind of fabricated in your mind, and is it actually as you thought it was, and all the rest of it. But
people have watched that video over and over again and somehow suddenly been 300 miles or however far away it is from where they actually were on that night.
I was one of the 2,000 Arsenal fans at the age of 6 who was there in the crowd, jumping around on top of people. I gave Mickey Thomas a little hug at the end and did the somersault
as you would do normally.
Yeah, I mean, it was, but it was just this common thread throughout my childhood. My brother, my dad, and we'd all go to games whenever we could, and that was when you could still sort of rock up to the North Bank, pay for a ticket on the door, stand. I say stand, I mean we were sat on the kind of cross barriers and stuff. It became a little bit more difficult the older we got. Obviously, getting tickets to matches became a lot more problematic. My dad had a season ticket, so did his best mate, who didn't tend to go too often. So my brother and I would sort of like interchange and go to matches. And my uncle had a season ticket, which I would also get to use sometimes. But it was just this kind of common thread. But in terms of like it becoming a focus and like ending up on Arseblog and stuff, I had no idea. I was at university. I came out of university. I had no desire to be a sports journalist, or even it never even occurred to me to write about Arsenal. I mean, in some respects, like the whole idea of blogging about something was completely new still at that time. I mean, I was reading Andrew just as I was coming out of university, so I was aware of that, but it was just this sort of unusual fan narrative, which I found quite fascinating. And there were a few other blogs around that time as well. But I just sort of fell into sports journalism about 3 years after university, and through that got into conversation with Andrew. And then when I was made unemployed, Andrew kind of very kindly, it was a kind of right place, right time situation. He was looking to set up a news site, and me and this other guy that I was working with were free because we'd been made unemployed from the job we were in, and we were just like, yeah, we'll do it. And I have stuck it out, and it's just become this big thing. I mean, I always knew, I was always really interested in Andrew and his story, and like how he had stuck at something and managed to take it from, you know, a hobby into something a bit more kind of, you know, mainstream, become his main form of, income and stuff. And
Yeah.
I thought that was just incredibly interesting.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating, and the length of time that he's been doing it. I mean, I spoke to a few people outside while we were in line to get into the Union Chapel because I didn't have the special backdoor entry that I'm sure you did.
Well, I'll tell you about that in a minute.
That's the last time I'll mention backdoor entry, by the way. Well, I want to hear that story, but all I was going to say is I talked to a few people who, you know, I was joking with them, but it really wasn't a joke, that they were probably listening to Arseblog in the womb, you know, because I mean, they were now 17, 18, 19 years old.
Yeah. I mean, that is kind
listening
of crazy.
to or having read, I guess, in the womb.
Yeah, I mean, but it is crazy. I mean, it was the consistency that more than anything, because I think what maybe, without wanting to blow smoke up Andrew's eyes, what sets Andrew apart is the fact that you can wake up in the morning, you can know that there's going to be 1,000 words there ready for you to read with your morning coffee. And I think if you become part of someone's routine, then, you know, you take your status in their life to another level, really, I guess. And, you know, more than anything, I remember, you know, it's say 8-9 years since we did a book launch, but people were coming from all over the world to kind of just shake his hand and say, thank you very much for being part of, you know, my everyday life. And that was, you know, that was 8-9 years ago, and the audience has just got bigger and bigger since then. So, but yeah, in terms of the Union Chapel, I rocked up, was like, oh yeah, my name's on the guest list. It wasn't on the guest list.
It wasn't. My name was on the guest list. How was your, because of Elliot? How was your name not on the guest list?
It was super embarrassing. Then I was doing that kind of like not wanting to say.
You came in through the front door.
I came very much through the front door
without a ticket, and they were like,
and then had to argue with people at the front until I was allowed in, which was really.
This is one of the bad things about you not being on camera that often is, you know, you would have rocked in the front door, and people would have like carried you to your seat, basically.
Oh, I wouldn't go that far, Mike. Come on. But no, that was quite funny. I texted that. Well, I didn't want to text Andrew because I knew he'd be a little bit like nervous because he's just about to go on stage. I was like, you know, oh, by the way, you know, can I come in? But I managed to wangle it. Sat right at the back.
Wow.
It was good. It was a good view. It was a good view from the back.
Oh no, I mean, there's no bad view in that place. And I'm gonna spend a lot of time talking about that show with Andrew tomorrow on our podcast. And I have some videos that he may have. I think he's seen some of them of kind of interviews I did outside
nice.
The man on the street type interviews to get a sense of what people are up to. I'll play one or two of them tonight and then save the rest for tomorrow. But you've answered my next question, which is, you know, some of the greatest, best guests that I enjoy on this podcast are journalists. I mean, we've had almost all of the top name journalists on the podcast, and the reason is because I really enjoy the story of how they got into it. I mean, I took journalism classes in high school and really kind of thought that might be a career path for me. I guess that somewhat explains why I'm back here now doing a pseudo very small hobby of journalism. It's certainly not a full-time thing, but my daughter's in school to be a journalist. So, you know, there's really two pathways to sports journalism. And I could even say Arsenal journalism in a sense, and the traditional way and the casual way that sometimes becomes more than just casual. And it sounds like yours was the latter, but you certainly got a capacity for it. And Andrew has an eye for talent.
Oh, well, that's very kind of you. These free compliments are just lovely. I really should just pay the money, shouldn't I?
My goal is that you're going to feel so guilty that you just fork out the 10,000. You can cancel after 1 month. That's fine. There's no annual contract.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it was with the journalism stuff. I think having fallen into it and the type of role that it was, which was online, and it was very much kind of Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, and it very much allowed me to continue being an Arsenal fan. What I found when I got to the point where I could have gone on and become like a proper sports journalist, let's say, you know, I had a job offer from ESPN and I wavered over it. And ultimately I turned it down because I was just starting out on the Arseblog journey. And I sensed there was something good there, but also I didn't want to give up being an Arsenal fan to go and become like a sports journalist that would end up having to spend his weekends somewhere else.
Really?
And that, yeah, I mean, ultimately,
that's surprising. I mean, ESPN comes calling, and you look into the future and see that it might kind of change your user experience as an Arsenal supporter, and stick with the up and coming.
Yeah, I mean, Arseblog was a hobby. It was only ever a hobby. I didn't expect it to turn into kind of like something that I would necessarily make money out of, right? It was something I wanted to do because I really respected Andrew and I thought the opportunity was great, and there was an amazing community already there and in place. So to be part of that was something I was like, well, I could feel myself feeling passionate about being part of that, and I 100% do. Doing Arseblog is not a chore for me whatsoever. Like, I wake up in the morning and I'm like, right, scan the papers. Let's see what we've got to talk about. Andrew and I'll have a conversation. We'll discuss what we want to do, and then we'll divvy it up, and then we'll go from there. But I found myself being I can't not watch Arsenal matches, right? Like, if I'm abroad, I have to find a pub. If I'm, in the country, I have to either be in front of a TV or I have to watch it, in the stadium live. Like, I can't really find a means of compromising. So the idea that I might end up kind of having to report on tennis on a Saturday when there's an Arsenal game and I can't really watch it and all of that. It
wasn't even that like what they call soccer net or the football coverage for ESPN. It was
a kind of like general sports role. Yeah, I was going in, I think, at a kind of deputy editor level on a yeah, it was all online, obviously, but it was. Yeah, just for whatever reason at that particular moment, it wasn't quite right for me. And I don't in any way, shape or form regret it, even though, my career has sort of diverged into two different areas. So obviously I have Arseblog, and then I have an actual day job, which has taken me kind of through a marketing route and now ultimately to like a creative agency, which is great. And I'm very lucky. I have a boss who's kind of very understanding. In fact, was one of the other people who started Arseblog News at the very, yeah, exactly. So, it's kind of it's worked out okay, and I just find a way to make it work, balance everything.
Well, living the dream, and had ESPN offered you the 14 shirt, I bet you would have gone. But
if they'd offered me $100,000 a week, I'd have gone. Yeah.
Well, that's true. I think we now know the range that they offered you was somewhere in between $0 and $100,000 a week. Yeah. You also had a podcast for a while called the Left Field Pod. Tell us a little bit about how that got started. Looks like you kind of put a bow on that one about 6 months or so ago. But so what happened there? I have to admit I wasn't aware of that until I started doing a bit of research on.
It was a really fun project that me and a guy called Carl Wogan, Irish guy. I love working with Irish guys.
Apparently so.
We used to work together, and he approached me kind of out of the blue. Actually, I was quite taken aback and surprised, and because we'd worked together, but we didn't have like a super close relationship. And he's just like, I've got this idea. I want to do a general sports podcast, but kind of take a slightly left field take on what's going on a weekly basis. And we developed a format which was working really well. And really enjoyed it. I mean, it was just a godsend during, basically 18 months of the pandemic, having someone else who on a weekly basis you knew you were going to talk to, and it gave you kind of something to shape your free time around. And it was really, really fun. And I don't think until we kind of drew a line under it in January, and that was partly because Carl had a new job that was coming onto the horizon and he needed to focus, that we took stock of like the audience that we built, because, it was small, but it was passionate. The small number of people who were involved were passionate, and a lot of nice messages.
Same names commenting on the show.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't actually necessarily realize how much you kind of work your way into people's lives a little bit with podcasts, and people don't always sort of feel the need to sort of tell you there and then in the moment, but when you're not there, they then pipe up. And really enjoyed it. It was really fun. More than anything, it gave me an insight into other sports, because I'd become so involved with Arsenal, so involved with Arseblog, that you can become kind of quite myopic, and sort of it becomes all you ever bother, or you only ever have time for that, because ultimately, if you start looking around and start to watch other sports, your girlfriend's going to turn around and go, fucking hell, like, we're never we're never going to be together, at all. So
well, that's the problem when it's your hobby, then you now have, and this is what I suffer from in my 25-year marriage is the last 4 or 5 years. It's been, all right, so you already like the sports a lot. You have a very, very busy day job that supports us and keeps us happy, which she respects. And now you've got this other hobby that's taking, 1 to 8 hours a week. Like when am I going to get to see you?
So, I mean, what I did was I found a means of legitimizing it by basically framing it almost as like work. I was like, well, I've got to watch this other sport now because it's like,
that's why
otherwise we're going to
charity.
Yeah. I'm hoping you're still there.
Did I cut out there for a second? Sorry about that.
You did for a moment, yeah.
So the May trip was kind of a last minute thing. I was starting to get FOMO on the show at the Union Chapel. My daughter was going to be there, and it was the last game of the season, and of course we were going to be celebrating top 4. And I'm like, I gotta go just for the weekend. So I the Friday night, I'm like, the Friday night's open. If I can get a couple people, and Andrew came for a bit, Paz came, and Elliot came, Tom came. I mean, just we got a great turnout. I'll do an event at the Tollington, and that'll be like my excuse for going on this entire trip. I'll get my daughter settled in. I'll do the charity thing, and then so I have to go.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, so legitimizing it is it's a big
deal. And look, more than anything, because Cahill was a massive US sports fan. So whether it was NBA or baseball or NFL or what have you, like my knowledge of that was so limited. So kind of being able to open my eyes a little bit to that and just basically have fun with a mate. It was good fun each week. What nobody really tells you though is that actually you spread yourself a little bit thin across a load of sports, and that suddenly you have to do some research, and then suddenly it becomes a little bit more work. And then obviously, you've got to dedicate one evening a week at least. And it does eat into you and eat into your time. So I think we just got to a point where we were a little bit stretched, and we haven't sort of necessarily drawn a line under it. I think it might come back, but just in a slightly different guise. Rather than weekly, it might be more kind of, sporadic, but we'll see. It'd be fun to pick it up again for sure.
It'd be like the Tuesday Club, essentially, in both frequency and quality. That's,
Yeah. Do it when you fancy it.
When we get lazy, which is really what it is, we just say we're just trying to act like the Tuesday Club. That's all we're doing. Well, when you come back, if you come back, you will find that there is a massive open hole for football podcasts and sports podcasts in general. It's an underserved market with not nearly enough for people to listen to.
Yeah, heading into a pandemic when people didn't have anything to do, and starting up a podcast was the most original idea that I could have.
I mean, sometimes it doesn't take originality. It takes hard work and regularity.
Exactly.
Neither of which I know anything about. So speaking of research, you said your favorite Arsenal player of all time is someone that I think is very well deserving, but surprisingly, it's not Thierry Henry, not Dennis Bergkamp, and not even Gervinho. Do you want to reveal who your number one is?
God,
I'm the same person you said.
Yeah, so am I.
That I found
I'm hoping it was Anders Limpar or Ian Wright.
That was, I think, your first love for Arsenal, which I always found fascinating, especially because that numbnuts on a certain YouTube channel said that he wasn't a legend right after he'd played in the Legends game.
Yeah. Was it Ian Wright or was it?
I mean, I love it. You're asking me who.
I've suddenly it suddenly occurred to me because when I flash back to my childhood, it's always like Anders Limpar, Ian Wright, Anders Limpar, Ian Wright, and Anders Limpar was there just before Ian Wright, and then the two of them had this incredible, season and a half or so of crossing over. And for me, they were just two guys who just played with so much joy. And Wright, he was just brilliant. I mean, he came in and he just became this kind of one-man goal-scoring machine. And as a kid, I was a striker, and I just loved that he played with such a. You never really knew what he was going to do. He could do everything. He scored every different type of goal under the sun, and I I love that so much.
It's amazing. He got such a late start too at
yeah
level. I mean, he arrived. I remember him playing with Crystal Palace. I was there 88 to 90, and then I left. And then I pretty much, when I left, I was completely dark on the whole. I remember them starting to talk about a Premier League.
Sure.
So like I missed the whole early 90s and late 90s, and Ian Wright. Just it's one of my biggest regrets is missing his career at Arsenal, because it was just phenomenal. But being a huge fan of Ian Wright, how disgusted did you feel, and how much did you rush to Twitter to abuse Lassana Diarra, Sammy Nasri, Mikel Arteta, Aaron Ramsey, and Danny Ceballos when they just handed them the number 8? Don't they know how heavy that number 8 is? And
how
dare
the funny thing with numbers, right, is that one, I'm terrible at maths, so numbers always just kind of straight over my head. I don't have a kind
There's
of
no maths involved with just 8.
You've got to count from 1 to 8. Come on.
All right, that's fair.
I have no relationship with numbers. Like, numbers, as far as I'm concerned, are just like these things that scare me. So I'm all right with
Giant
words.
Gooner, despite having beards that are similar, you don't meddle with the same.
But gosh. Ian taking the number 8. Obviously he made the number 8 his own, but at the time when he joined, like, squad numbers weren't even a thing. So, like, it wasn't until 93,
right.
I think, when they started to introduce him and stuff, and obviously he became synonymous with it and all the rest of it. But like, I've seen all the discussion this week about Nketiah taking the number 14 shirt, and I'm kind of like it's not like it's 1 to 11. Those are the shirt numbers you really, really want. I'm not really kind of like one for retiring shirts or getting too sort of fussed with other players. Ultimately,
really an English thing to do, is it? That's
I guess
a sport thing.
Yeah, I guess so. And look, if people want to take offense on behalf of some other people, I doubt Thierry Henry's lost any sleep this week about whether or not Eddie Nketiah has taken the number, over from him. He doesn't care. If anything, he's probably quite pleased, because I'm almost certain those two crossed paths when Henry was doing some coaching at Arsenal. I actually think it's a really nice thing. You've got a homegrown player who's taken 14. You've got a homegrown player who's taken 7. You've got a homegrown player who's taken the number 10. We're creating this really nice kind of academy pathway, and they're becoming the stars of the show. I can't see why anybody would have a problem with that.
I think I think it's an intentional move to have 7, 10, and 14 from homegrown players.
Yeah.
Timing worked out in a sense. I don't know that they would have given 14 to Nketiah had Aubameyang left a year earlier, but he's committed himself to the club. He's been here for 9 years, not quite as long as the other two, not quite at the level of the other two, but I think it's a strong statement. And someone else could be wearing the 14 next year for all we know. It's not that big of a deal.
He could have taken the number 9. He could have taken the number 11. Those are two pretty prestigious shirts as well. So actually, he couldn't have taken 11, could he? Because Martinelli's just taken it, but you know what I mean. Anyway, as for Nasri though, Nasri was just a dick. It didn't matter.
I loved that guy when he came in. I was like, this guy's got some skill, and just before he left, he was a dick. Like he's one of the few players, and there's one in this year's club, but in our current club. But I'm trying to turn around on him. I'm trying. But there's not a lot of guys who, while they're wearing an Arsenal shirt, I think are a dick. And that guy is still a dick, and he hasn't even played in years.
Yeah, I think he may even just have retired pretty young, I guess. He didn't really, in the end, make the best of his career, because he had a hell of a lot of skill. There was a period there just before he moved to City where he was really on the top of his game. You had to enjoy him, but at the same time, you kind of recognize that maybe as a personality, he might be a difficult character, not the type of person you'd necessarily want to share a bus
never
with.
Any issues with the national team. Every single club he went to. Yeah, I think his last season was. I think he pretty much finished off at the beginning of the pandemic with Anderlecht.
Right. Okay. Yeah. He got taken there, didn't he, by Vincent Kompany, I think, and that was a kind of last gasp at salvation of what was a once pretty decent career. But oh well, I didn't think I'd come on and start talking about Samir Nasri. That's definitely
it's just because they had the gall. They had the gall to give him Ian Wright's number. But I'm glad you feel that way about the numbers. I think the vast majority of people do feel that way about the number, and anyone who's freaking out about that is just looking for a stick to hit the club with. I always say, I mean, they're looking for things to be upset about.
Yeah. I mean,
it's
I think
it's not the 7 at Manchester United. Even it's not the England captain's armband. It's something that one of our perhaps 2 or 3 best players, if you include Limpar, of all time, made famous because of how good he was, but it wasn't really that famous before him. It was a substitute's number, and it's never been worn after him by anybody.
It's Thierry Henry's number. Thierry Henry made it his number. He made a thing of it, and that's fine. I'm not really a massive fan of the idea of retiring shirts, which I saw people suggesting, because ultimately you'll always end up with one good player in each of those positions at some point. And if you start retiring shirts left, right, and center, you're going to end up with some pretty crazy numbers. And for people like me who don't know numbers, I may not be able to count up to them. So it's going to get very expensive for parents putting the shirts numbers on the back of the shirts when it's up to the thousands. So, think of the parents, I say.
I've seen I've seen basketball referees whose numbers are in the hundreds, because I think they have one assigned number for them. So there's 30, 40 referees in the league, or maybe even more. And it's just weird seeing a 3-digit number on somebody's back. But if they retired numbers, you're going to end up with that at some of the clubs. So
yeah.
So my favorite Arsenal player of all time, I often say, is David Rocastle. That's the stock answer. But I'm just too embarrassed to admit that the real answer is Callum Chambers. And as a Callum Chambers stan, which I think is what the kids call it these days, I'm just livid that this happened.
Oh my God!
They give the 21 away.
So, I mean,
this was the big news of the day today. So tell us how your day as writing for the blog and just in general goes, because we all knew this was coming, but then it finally drops in a weird way this morning.
Yeah, I mean, how did it play out? I mean, we're pretty organized these days. So I think I've joked many times before on Twitter about the number of draft posts that never see the light of day, because we want to be quick off the mark when something does drop. So you don't mind spending 10 minutes writing the story. And if it never gets published, it never gets published. But we're loaded up at the moment. There's a hell of a lot of stuff sitting in the draft. So
you've got the Osherman tweet written?
Oh yeah. Everything's.
Do you have Christian Akunku?
No, we didn't have him. I mean, I can't reveal exactly what's in there, because if I did, I would undermine. Stillman is crazy. At one point there was 30 drafts in there, and it was all these different transfers for the women's team that he'd obviously got wind of, and I was like, wow, there's a hell of a lot of comings and goings going on.
We're turning over the team every 3 weeks.
Well, that was what it was like, and the weirdest thing was Tim knew this stuff before anybody else did, because he's effectively managing the team now over there. I think
it seems that way. Yeah, he walked around there. I mean, I went to a women's game last year and saw him there, and he's the mayor of Borehamwood. I mean, it's incredible.
He's the mayor of Borehamwood. What a great title. He's a lovely man as well, his old Tim.
Oh, he's fantastic.
But yeah, no, it was pretty relaxed. I mean, mostly it's just about being online at the right time and making sure that you're able to publish. And even then, it's not so bad if you happen to have to run to the post office or something, because you can just publish from your phone because you've done it in advance. But I mean, obviously today, the big thing was the fact that the club were teasing it, and some real internet nerds had gathered quite quickly that they were spelling out the tweets with FABI, to the point where we were sitting there waiting. And I think about 5 o'clock, Andrew and I said, might not happen today, and it must have been a coincidence. Obviously, it wasn't a coincidence, and soon enough. So then it was,
that whole first initial thing. I think they ripped that off of the gerbil. I have to say, it's not original, it's not funny, but Jerby went with the kind of the initial thing, and Arsenal ripped it off.
I think probably people don't realize quite how much the club are keeping tabs on what's going on around the social media. I mean, they're very, very on it. They're very kind of keen to kind of get, a vibe of what the atmosphere is like online. And obviously they know what's going on in the stadium. But
did they mean for the first official word to come from just the club shop? Was that intentional?
I would imagine not. I think because I've heard talk that they're planning a new Arsenal website at some point, and I do wonder whether they've got some kind of caching issues on the main site whereby they press publish and stuff doesn't quite appear as it should at the same time, because I've certainly noticed like the tweets will appear live and then you go to the main site and there won't be anything there. So then you're kind of refreshing it, trying to find it. And then that makes me panic because I wonder whether I've gone too early and I freak, anyway, it's kind of this weird stuff when you sort of look at stuff as long as I have, and like you can see where the standards are dropping on the editorial or where they've gone up or where a new person's come in. And I love all that kind of weird stuff without getting.
The club shop actually announced the location of the parade for the double that we're winning this year.
Oh, great! Where is it? Islington. I hope.
Shockingly, it's in Woolwich, but going back to the roots.
Well, if we do the double, I don't care where we do the bloody parade. We can
they're doing it in Baltimore. They're doing it in the Baltimore, and they're doing a pre-parade after the Everton game in Baltimore next.
Oh God,
that's gonna be fun. So,
one of my highlights of the year so far has been making a Wire-related joke about the fact that Arsenal were playing in Baltimore, and then your man from the Wire kind of hitting us up and calling out Arseblog for having done the joke.
That was amazing. I did not expect that he. I mean, that was just out of the blue, right? I mean, the guy or anything like that. That's my favorite. That clip is the one. There's one where he did it and it was 10 seconds long, and my friend from up the street and I, who loved that show together. I mean, we're always saying that to each other, and I probably shouldn't admit that out loud, but everything's like she. And there was one where I have it on my phone. It's not, I can't play it here, but it's like 10 seconds long, and I just love that actor forever just because of that. And the fact that he saw that and responded to it was hilarious.
I feel like I should find his name because I'm not doing him justice here. But let me. Here we go. Isaiah Whitlock Jr. Yeah, I just put Arseblog Baltimore, and it was the first.
I just did actor she, and it says Isaiah Whitlock Jr.
Yeah,
Google's pretty good.
But I hope he's in the. I hope someone finds him in the stands when that friendly takes place.
I have to look for him. I do that he would be a great interview. Considering he seems to have Arsenal and/or football on his radar. So, are
you doing all the stateside friendlies this summer? Are you?
Yeah, I'm addicted. I go where the team goes, and I will be. I was going to ask you because I know the last time they came over, we somehow started as a joke from Andy, but we ended up as credentialed media, and sitting in the room with Josh Kroenke on the We Care Do You Day in Denver, talk about strange stories. But this year we're going to most likely be credentialed media again, and Arseblog came over last time. I know James is coming over to Baltimore this time, but anyone else from the Arseblog empire coming over that you know?
Don't think so. I think Andrew's holiday plans take him to Spain at some point, but I don't think he's going to make it stateside this year. I might try and go. I think there's talk of there being an Australia tour next year. My brother lives down in Melbourne, so if they happen to go down there, I might try and double up. But I've not done any of the pre-season tours. I kind of take a deep breath at the end of May and just sort of try and relax for a couple of months, really.
The pre-season tours are great, not for the actual news around the team, but for the social element of it. And I think it's worth not just mentioning it, but covering it as well, which is kind of my goal, is to get a mix between, okay, here's what happened in the press conferences, because it's also a kick for me as a pseudo journalist to be able to
of course,
which as long as I don't screw it up by having my phone alarm go off in front of Unai Emery like I did last time, but then also kind of covering the fan enjoyment angle of it, because it is just one constant party. The game itself is the low light of the entire trip. It's the befores and the afters and the interaction between the club and the fans and all that. So, because James is more than likely going to be sending all of his information to The Athletic, if you guys need a stateside correspondent, I'm just saying, I know the guy.
You've got the job.
that would be happy to volunteer for that. So,
do they let Atlas Chaps into the media area, do you think? Or
if you've seen how James Benj dresses in the media area, I think they'll let just about anything in. Andy makes fun of me because for the first one, the one in Denver, I was taking it really, really seriously. I did not want to stand out, and so I wore like practically a suit, and he was like in shorts and a short sleeve shirt, and the second I saw James Benj, I'm like, okay, I probably overdid it a little bit.
I think sports journalists might be the scruffiest profession going. Like I'm almost certain. Like
I'll forever love James for that though, because he showed me that like I don't need to stress about it. So the next city in LA, I spent like the 20 minutes before the game just scarfing down some of the best. What's that meat brisket that I've ever had in my life, and I showed up in the press box with a red shirt and sauce all over my face. So I learned very quickly when it comes to that. But yeah, I think the Atlas Chaps will work in Baltimore, maybe not in Florida because they don't like that kind of thing down there.
I'm curious as to why Baltimore. Nobody's actually kind of really gone into the detail on that. I'm assuming there must be like a reason for it, but it's a curious one for sure. It's not the most high-profile destination stateside that they could have gone.
Well, and do you think that? I mean, Eddie Nketiah essentially is
Marlowe
Stanfield.
Yeah. Stanford, yeah.
I mean, they've got to do something with that. Idris Elba's a Gooner. I mean, there's a lot of tie-ins. I'm not suggesting that that's why they went to Baltimore, but now that they are, they really, really need to pursue this because there's at least 3 characters that have an Arsenal tie-in now after the Isaiah Whitlock.
The last time I went to the States, when was it? October 2019, I think. I was in LA and I was in a restaurant and I was looking over and I was like, is that Eddie Nketiah sitting there? And it was Marlowe. It actually was. And I was sitting there, I was thinking, it can't be Eddie Nketiah because that's.
Do you think he gets that a lot? Like I wouldn't think he must. Do you think he gets? Are you Eddie Nketiah, or do you think Eddie?
Oh no, I don't think he. I don't. Yeah, can you?
I guess it depends on where you are. I mean, if Eddie Nketiah was in LA,
yeah. He might get that, but I don't imagine there were too many people coming up to him going, "Are you the guy who scored 2 goals in the Carabao Cup against Norwich the other day?" Like, yeah.
Are you the guy that single-handedly beat Norwich a few years ago? That was amazing.
But yeah, no, I mean, at the time I was kind of like, because Eddie was a bit on the fringes. I was like, it can't be Eddie, you know. Also, it was like during the season, and I was in LA, but.
Well, during that season, he probably could have been. I mean,
but then I did, I had to ask my friend who's kind of like, he's a bit more attuned to LA life. And he was just like, oh no, that is actually, apologies to the bloke, I can't remember his actual name, but that's Marlowe. Yeah.
Well, that's hilarious. There's always a famous person that you see when you're over there. And I'm sure I'm sure there were other people in the restaurant going.
I mean, that was the highlight of it, unfortunately. I was kind of holding out for someone a bit more famous on that trip, but
Well, you take what you can get. So
yeah.
So I was going to ask you. You've already kind of let me know about the show last month that you didn't exactly have the VIP treatment that I thought you might have. But I heard a rumor that the entire show was scripted, like all of the elements of it, and that you were the brainchild, that you wrote. Right down to pause forgetting to use the microphone 5 times.
Yeah,
truth to the rumor that they just didn't. There wasn't one original word coming out of their mouth.
No, honestly, I was slightly disappointed by the delivery of some of the lines. I have to say, they let themselves down.
It didn't do your penmanship justice. I'm not saying that you're the one that told me that, but I'm not going to not say that you were the one that told me that either.
I have to say, given that it was a crossover event, I thought the guys did a really good job at kind of like allowing each other the space to be who they are on their own shows, if you know what I mean, because like finding the balance there was always going to be a little bit difficult, and especially with 800 people staring down at you. I thought they did a really good job, and personally, my direction and writing was incredible.
It was. You were in the back. The people didn't see this, but you were in the back doing this whole thing with the wand, the magic wand, and
the magic wand. That's what the composers call it. Yeah, the magic wand. No, it was a good night. And look, honestly, it was so nice because obviously that was the first time you and I met, and it was a similar situation. I hadn't met Elliot before, hadn't met Poz before. Obviously James and Tim and Andrew, obviously I'm quite well, I've known them quite a lot and crossed paths with them a lot. But it was really, I was just incredible, like being part of the atmosphere and then the community, and then the drinking just was a bit too much. I was just very, very,
How
very
many
hungry.
of the pubs afterward? I mean, because there was a series of that first one, which was a disaster.
Yes, the
Then
tiny one
the
where there
tiny
was
one right around the corner where there 900 people went, and of course no air conditioning, and it was warm, and that very quickly turned into a much roomier, nicer place. And then there was yet another one or two after that, I think. Where I pulled the plug after the second one because we had the game the next day.
Things are very, very blurry for me. There are some pictures. There was a really nice man who just kept telling me I had a lovely jacket, and he was huge. He was like 7 foot tall, and God bless you. I've forgotten your name, but I just remember sort of spending the whole time. Yes. I spent the whole time just kind of staring up at the ceiling to have a conversation with him. He was just so nice, and it was just a really nice atmosphere. I think, given the team had sort of screwed up on the Monday against Newcastle, and that the hopes had kind of fallen apart about the idea that we might actually get Champions League, I wasn't quite sure what to expect. I thought it might be kind of a bit low key, a bit kind of, or people might be angry, and you never really know with those kind of live shows how vocal people want to be. But it was just a sort of really sort of jolly affair, I guess. And
people needed something to enjoy. I mean, Elliot told me earlier that week before the show, he's like, we had a lot of things planned that we decided not to go through with because of what had happened to the top four. Like it was supposed to be a coronation and a celebration, and it was something very much not that. But to the credit of everybody involved, you wouldn't have known that we had just blown a massive opportunity, and that we were feeling pretty negatively about the team overall by the attitude everyone had that evening. And that's the power of social media, of social media people who like to have a smile and a laugh and banter every once in a while, and not just focus on the anger. And that's not me trying to proselytize about how people should be. I'm just saying, in that environment, in the Tollington the next morning, the next evening after the game, I mean, the frustration about what had happened for, I think, a lot of people had already been built in. And from that point on, it was just, let's just enjoy what we have left.
Yeah, I mean, I always think I always find it's a privilege to be a match-going fan, because you always get to experience more than just the match. There's the people around you, the conversations that happen before and after, and you kind of take the edge off a bad result by just being around people. During the pandemic, that wasn't possible, and you had to watch everything from home, and your first port of call for being annoyed was to go on Twitter and moan about it. You can kind of see where the microaggressions grow into something more than that, and you don't get to sort of blow off steam in a more social environment. And I mean, that night was just really people getting together and wanting to be part of something, and it was just I found it really heartwarming. I think Andrew was slightly blown away by it, because he hadn't really left Ireland up until that point, and obviously the last couple of years have been pretty traumatic for him, and I think it was a sort of reawakening about this kind of, the world is out there, and I definitely think he got the flavor for doing some more of those events. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I know Elliot was almost in tears the next day talking about how really just wonderful the community was, and how he didn't realize that there was such a community. I mean, he realized, but seeing it in person, it's an amazing thing.
And look, the club, I know, were blown away by the charity efforts as well.
Phenomenal.
I have it firsthand. They've said to me, they kind of, they're slightly in awe of it, because actually they've not been able to produce the same kind of results themselves when they've done charitable pushes, and I think that was a really interesting thing to hear. And obviously, I think you can only see that going from strength to strength now, year on year. I mean, obviously there were certain circumstances around, terrible circumstances around this war in Ukraine that kind of helped provoke the response that played out at the beginning of the year. But all the same, I mean, obviously these guys now have rooted themselves in this charitable causes thing, and built that relationship with the Arsenal foundation, and obviously Andrew's donation to UNICEF as well. So
it's just so symbiotic. It works well. I mean,
and you guys are obviously in on that as well, because you realize that by building a community, you can basically put your cap out occasionally, and people, because they're part of your community, will want to be part of that cause.
And look, I'm very recognizing of the fact that our platform and our audience is of a very, very small fraction of their size. And I'm happy to fill in whatever slot in the fundraising hierarchy that we can. So what they're doing, the amount they raised and the time they raised it is absolutely amazing. I am, and I was right even before you said this, just going to slide in about 2 minutes to talk about Gooners versus Cancer, because we have some good events coming up. We're 8 days now left in the bidding for the ability to join for the 89 shirt. Have you seen this shirt that we are auctioning off or raffling off?
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah.
It's something you can only get through Gooners versus Cancer. I'm going to play about a slightly over a minute long video. If you haven't seen it, I think most of you that are in the chat have seen it, but there's 8 days left to get in. We're gonna have the drawing at the end of the month, and however many people are in it, there's about 380 entries in it so far. So if we end up with 390, if we end up with 450, that's the chance that you have to win this shirt. And all you got to do is go to goonersvcancer.com to get it. So here's a look at the shirt.
Good ball by Dixon. Finds Smith. The top shot to the midfield. Thomas. It's up for grabs now. Thomas. Right at the end.
All right, that's enough of that. For the first time, I'm just thinking like who has the nicest handwriting out of the four? Like I never really. I mean, they're all very, very different. The one that surprises me the least is Alan Smith, because he's so elegant and like erudite and stuff.
Oh, sorry, I've started playing the video myself again there. I wanted to see the handwriting again. I think Alan Smith's got the most elegant handwriting, don't you think? I mean,
it's definitely the most elegant. It's kind of, it's just very fancy, and that's kind of how Alan is. He's just very, very. I think he glides around. He's very,
If you'd asked me to write on it, I'd have gone all capitals as well, because I think it's a sort of safe choice. You can I can control my hand more easily when I'm doing kind of block capitals than if I start trying to, turn it into like calligraphy or something.
I think Lukic and Michael Thomas went for the all caps.
Yeah, I reckon Michael Thomas is probably the most similar to me. But I don't want to brag here, but as a two-time handwriting champion under 12 at school, I got
the worst marks for handwriting. I was a maths person. I can count to 8, and so handwriting was never my thing. So my hope is, and I'm really on track for this right now, is to never be famous enough to have to sign anything for anybody. And I'm doing really well in that so far.
Well, look, when I've paid that 10 grand a month and I'm getting those 8x10 photos, I want those signed.
I'll go to handwriting school. My signature is basically just a complete scribble, because I also never learned how to read. But what was I going to say? Oh, the other thing. Are you a gamer? Are you into the FIFA at all, or do you not have time for that, or would your partner think that you'll just absolutely?
Do you know what? I think the last time
get away from her.
The last time I played FIFA would have been on a PlayStation 2. I think there's been a few game consoles since then. I mean, honestly,
I don't even know. My son's the gamer in the family, but we do a FIFA tournament every year for Gooners versus Cancer as well. This year will be the 3rd annual tournament, and just follow Gooners v Cancer on Twitter. All the details about how to enter. There's a PlayStation version. There's a Xbox version. There's even a Nintendo Wii version.
Oh my God!
No one. There's not a Nintendo Wii version.
I mean, you could say this stuff. I would just believe it hook, line, and sinker because I'm completely gullible about these things.
Well, we accept donations for the Wii version, and then we just don't run the tournament. But no, those two we do. It's like a Champions League format. It's fun. You interact with other people. There are prizes for winning. The entry fee, of course, as usual, is just a donation to the Leukemia Lymphoma Society. And you get some extra tickets for the raffle later this summer. That's going to have a lot. So we're constantly, we raise $25,000 a year, so about £20,000 a year. And wow. I probably spend about $18,000, not of that money, but of my own money on prizes. So I'm not sure that anyone's actually,
that's very impressive. I was going to say, I mean, rather than
18,000 on prizes is not true, by the way.
Again, gullible. But rather than me spend the £500 to buy like a PlayStation, maybe I should just give you the money and cut out the middleman, as it was. I'm only going to come last in the tournament anyway.
Right. Look, I'm not soliciting that donation, but I think that this shirt is calling your name. So. So anyway, 9 days left for that, and about 2 weeks to register for the FIFA tournament. Go to Gooners v Cancer on Twitter and goonersvcancer.com for more information on that. With just a few minutes remaining, because we're running a little bit long, but we've been having such a great conversation. There were a couple questions from the chat, and let's see if we can bring them up here. Fergus from the Guns and Yellow Ribbons podcast. Evening, Andrew. Love your content. What's your views on ex-Arsenal players being involved in coaching like Bold was and Per currently is? And how do you feel? And do you feel he's doing a good job with the academy?
I mean, look, I think Per was a kind of inspired choice actually for the academy, given that they had to look past the fact that one, he was still playing. Two, he had absolutely no administrative experience whatsoever. But I think both Arsene and Ivan Gazidis were very, very worried about losing Per to another club. And they were like, we've got to pin him down. And they threw a big opportunity at him. And they realized at the same time that he was going to be learning on the job and that he would need a lot of support. And I think initially, obviously, when they gave him the job, they were assuming that the both of them might be there a while to help him out. As it turned out, obviously, huge amount of ruction off the pitch and in the boardroom and whatnot. And the guy has just had to go about doing that job despite all of that. And I think now you think of the academy and you think of him. He's had to completely reshape it, remold it. I think the emphasis on the education that they give the players is far outside of just creating a pathway to the first team. He was banging on about strong young gunners. I think he's completely right, because he knows that like 90% of those guys aren't going to make it to the Arsenal first team. 80% of them may not even make it as a professional footballer after the age of 18 as well. So, that's a really forward-thinking guy that they've got in a really important position. And I think he 100% has my support. I think he's so switched on, so intelligent.
Now he's just lost his two coaches, though.
Yeah, he's just lost his two coaches, so he's going to have to, bounce back from that and start again. I think at that level now, especially when you make, when they got Kevin Betsy in, Kevin Betsy was quite a lot of people wanted him, and I think there was probably an understanding that this guy is going to do a job here, and he may well find himself moving up and into the first team opportunities elsewhere. I don't think he'll be too shaken by that. I mean, ultimately, there's a big network of people behind the guys who just happen to coach those age groups. And, lots of the guys that have the ability to move up and move down in and around the academy. So I think they'll be able to overcome that. But, Arsenal's such a pull for people. In terms of like getting more guys going back in and coaching, I mean, I know that George Bird, the Arsenal youth expert guy, he writes for Arseblog News as well, was talking about, there may even be an opportunity to Freddie Ljungberg to go back in there, because actually, weirdly, Freddie's not gone on and found a first team coaching opportunity for whatever reason, maybe of his own choice. I'm always in favour of seeing young guys. I think obviously Jack Wilshere seems to be weighing up whether or not he wants to play on it looks as though he's going to take up some kind of coaching position at Arsenal. That's
Well,
great.
Doesn't one of our first team players is working on his coaching badges as well?
I think these days what you find is that a lot of the I mean, obviously the current team with their average age, under 24, they're still trying to learn how to kick a football themselves. I mean, they're so young, but I mean, there's a lot of the guys now are kind of thinking ahead. They're far better educated about what their opportunities should look like when they get to the age of 30. And, Granit Xhaka is someone who you can 100% see being a manager at some point. I could definitely see, a couple of the, I'm just going to go through the guys here. I mean, Erdegaard has got manager written all over him. I heard Ramsdale joking about Cedric thinks he's like a Pep Guardiola type figure. You could definitely see those guys going into it. I could see
maybe as far as his playing quality is concerned, because Pep, I don't think ever really stood out on the pitch.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kieran Tierney, you could definitely see being the kind of the kind of number 2 somewhere, couldn't you? You can kind of see him being the guy in the tracksuit screaming at everyone, from a
wheelchair.
From a wheelchair, yeah, unfortunately. So yeah, look, I mean, I'm always supportive. I mean, I don't always necessarily go all in on the kind of you have to have the Arsenal DNA running through. I think that Arsenal DNA thing is slightly you have to understand the values of the club, but you don't necessarily have to have kind of been there for 20 years to get to grips with that. You can do that quite quickly. As someone like Arteta obviously has. He was only a player at Arsenal for 5 years or so, and he clearly bought into everything and has tried to carry that on.
So you're pretty confident that, I mean, you're glowing words about Per Mertesacker. I mean, despite losing, you think he's a guy who's indispensable in the club setup right now. It would be crazy to get rid of him.
Honestly, he's since Arsene went, he's been one of the key consistent parts of the entire setup. He now has built up a team around him. I'd be worried if he went elsewhere, to be honest, because I think a lot depends on him. I think he's a very stable character. I genuinely think we're incredibly lucky to have him. If we lost him, obviously I get concerned, but at the same time, we've been through several academy changes over the course of the last 10 years. We've had Andreas Jonker, obviously off the back of Liam Brady leaving and stuff. So, I mean, you don't want too many ructions at that level because you can see it with other clubs. It doesn't really help anything. If you need to have a level of consistency when everything else has been going crazy. It's been good that the academy has at least sat under one person for a while. We'll see how it goes. I mean, I just think Per's a good guy.
Well, he's undoubtedly that.
Yeah.
I just saw a tweet come across from David Ornstein now confirming that we put in a bid for Rafinha.
Wow.
I've seen a lot of writing, on Arseblog News about Rafinha. I've heard a lot on podcasts about it. Obviously, it's a different knock when Ornstein Ornstein puts it out there. I mean, we've had such a great conversation. We never even got to Rafinha or any other transfers. But I mean, would that be a move that would just absolutely blow people away if we actually snag him?
Well, I think if you look at it in the context of everything else that's going on, if you have Rafinha and let's assume that he comes in as a replacement for Pepe, and you have Vieira and he comes in as backup to challenge Erdegaard, and you've got Gabriel Jesus and he comes in and he's there with Nketiah, you can start to see the competition at every single level. And
did you say Rafinha as a backup to Pepe? Did I mishear that?
Well, I'm thinking I say backup to Pepe. I mean a replacement for Pepe, and if Pepe goes, his place in the squad.
I thought I misheard something. And I'm not saying that I actually thought.
No. I mean, no. Yeah. Let's assume Pepe goes, which I'm in some way, shape, or form he will this summer. Probably, I think on loan because I think we're going to find it really difficult to shift him, on a permanent because of the wages. So you see him and Saka offering you options on one side. You've got Martinelli and Smith Rowe on the other. You're starting to see quality everywhere on the pitch, which means that the bench is going to be full of guys. It means that the second team, when they go into other competitions, aren't going to be so coward. So, I mean, I'm all for it. I mean, I mean, Rafinha's a Brazil international. We're talking about getting Gabriel Jesus, another Brazil international, Martinelli, a Brazil international, Gabriel, a Brazil international. There's obviously a Brazilian playbook that Edu's got, or a black book that he's got. But also, I mean, we're talking about 4 players for one of the favourites for the World Cup later this year. So it's no bad thing. And I mean, I don't really know what my expectations were coming into this summer when it came to the transfer market. I thought maybe we'll get a couple of players, right? A couple of high profile players, maybe, and a couple of lower key players. We seem to be kind of going balls deep, for want of a better word, on getting big name signings. I mean, the Martinez fellow from Ajax sounds like an interesting opportunity as well. The Butcher, yeah. I mean, how could you not love an Argentine called the Butcher? So
we're going to be screwed when those international windows occur, where Conan Bowl play and 8 of our players are taking 19-hour flights to get back home.
Yeah, I mean, that's not ideal. I mean, you know, I do wonder whether they're slightly off the back of what happened with the AFCON and having to lose players during that. I mean, it's not ideal, but then at the same time, AFCON wasn't supposed to be in January originally and all the rest of it. But
you get the best players you can. You can't be diversifying amongst continental.
Exactly.
I mean,
you get the best players you can, and you basically try and create the best possible squad with the best competition going, you know, within it. And I'm very positive. I mean, the one thing behind all of this is that, you know, a few years ago, you knew that Arsenal weren't going to spend a whole load of money. You know, there were constraints around, obviously, repayment on the stadium and the rest of it. I don't really know what the financial situation is with the Cronkies. You know, where's this money coming from? How are we financing it? What loans are we taking out? When's it? What are the terms of it? All of that makes me slightly nervous, because as fun as it is to see, you know, someone writing blank checks and suddenly we're spending 250 million quid here and 250 million quid there, there is no such thing as a free lunch. At some point, we're going to have to somehow pay this off, and it's about how we do that and what the terms are. So, you know, there's no transparency there at the moment. All of that makes me a little bit nervous, because as much as it's fun sort of playing fantasy football, which is effectively what we're doing, you know, there are always questions in the background. How does this work?
Yeah, I mean, that opens another, you know, another podcast about the Cronkies and what their financial investment will be, and whether they're investing this, whether they're essentially self-leveraging and going to want it back before they ultimately sell the club. And that's, I just think, you know, I honestly think that they're just making a play to get back into where they can count on that Champions League money every single year. And if you know, we lost 107 million last year. This year, we're going to lose a lot of money. Now, on the books, if we spend 150 million and they're all players under 5-year contracts, you know, on the books, that counts as 30 million this year. Of course, you also have to add the 30 million from last year that this year is going to count. I mean, it's not in isolation. The overall bill's going up, but not by as much as you'd think. And, you know, if we go back to making 80, 90, 100 million a year profits because we fill the stadium and we get good European and domestic TV money from good finishes, if they take 10 million of it back as a repayment of a loan each year, I'm not gonna. Yeah,
no, I mean, I don't have a massive issue with them taking money out of the club as a loan situation at all. I mean, it's just about making sure that what we're doing is sustainable, unless, of course, they're going to commit to some kind of, you know, sugar daddy status that Roman Abramovich did. And,
and I don't know that they're not issuing equity, which is essentially the best way of just giving the club money that isn't even a loan. But that's a conversation for another day. I think most people will be excited that we're just doing whatever we can to improve the club.
I'm 100%. And look, I think if we can put this squad together, it massively puts the pressure on Mikel Arteta going into the new season, because, you know, that is a squad that needs to be, you know, there aren't really excuses around it, right? You know, it's going to be a very competitive league again next season, but Mikel Arteta has to have that team bolting out of the traps from the get-go in August. And they have to be challenging at Christmas, because if they're not, he's going to be in a difficult situation. I'm relatively positive off the back of what we saw last season, despite the last little bit of a collapse that we had, that there's a playing style I can see. There's a quality across the pitch. We know where the gaps are. and we just need more goals. And we're obviously going, that guy creates goals, that guy creates goals, that guy scores goals, put them in the team. That makes sense to me. That's
if
easy.
it works, it should just be 5 or 6 guys all just kind of in tune with each other. No, getting that relationship where they just know where each other's going to be, and instead of trying to cross it in for a Tammy Abraham or Olivier Giroud type to head the ball in, we'll score some creative Man City type goals. And I think that's the plan. Whether it comes to fruition or not, without the kind of money that Manchester City spends, we'll see.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, if Barcelona are going after Rafinha and Arsenal get him first, that's good. We're playing with the big boys there. I know that Barcelona's financial situation is pretty dire, but we're also going after guys with Premier League experience. So we know that they've done it. Vieira's
all the things
different.
that we've talked about: Premier League experience, guys that aren't going to be at the end of their career by the time their contract with us is over. People who have a winning pedigree. I mean, this is just it's all everything that we've wanted. So let's buckle up and hopefully enjoy the ride.
I hope so.
And the last question, because I feel bad that we didn't get to it, if we don't get to it. Are there aspects of football from when you first supported Arsenal and started watching football that have disappeared from the sport today that you miss? Just think if there's one. If you need a minute, I can think of one right off the top of my bat, right at the top of the bat. But
I mean, I think. I mean, I don't want to kind of go rose-tinted glasses too much, but I mean, obviously, back in the day, there was this level of spontaneity that used to be associated with being able to go to a football match, right? My grandfather, when he came over from Cyprus, he could pick and choose which matches he wanted to. He wanted to enjoy football, so he would go to Chelsea matches, Brentford matches. He'd go to Arsenal. He'd go and watch football wherever he wanted to go and watch football. And I guess even when I started going in the early 90s, you could still rock up on a match day and be able to turn up. And it was accessible. It was cheap. You could go with your whole family. You could take kids. It wasn't like something that you did once a year and you had to book into a calendar and a diary. And I guess that will never return. I have to say that world has passed, and I completely understand that. But I guess, that accessibility side of things, it's going to be more and more difficult, I think, to get new generations of people in, because ultimately, if I get a season ticket, I want to sit on that season ticket through until I die, pretty much. And
pass it on to your kids.
Yeah, exactly. And but I don't know that I'd necessarily, let's say, if I have kids, would I be able to afford to take 2 or 3 of them to a match with me every week? Would we all be able to have season tickets as they were growing? I don't think that would probably be possible at the moment. So I mean, it's really that. I mean, I think everything else, I think there's a lot of good things that are happening. I love the social media side of it and the fact that it's kind of brought together a global audience, because stuff like this wouldn't be happening. And I, in the past ran a site called the Arsenal Collective, where I loved collecting stories about how people became Arsenal fans, and hearing those stories and the individual unique stories of people from around the world. And it might just be some tiny little, sliding doors moment in their life, and suddenly that was decided, and then this passion built up. I love all of that. And
I mean, a lot of the answers, it's it's FIFA, it's something like television. For me, it was a sliding doors moment, and I love hearing everyone's story about that, because it's always something slightly different. I had a cousin whose brother brought me this shirt, or I just like the color red. I mean, really, it's fascinating. I never get tired of hearing the stories, which is why we usually start out with it. So for me, the thing that I miss from the older days is and it may be making a comeback soon, is the standing, the terrace.
Yeah.
The terraces won't be coming back, but I mean, that's that age of football, which is when you started sitting on the terrace in the North Bank. I was crushed up against it. 16-year-old at the time, and it was just a different way of watching football. Yeah,
I think there's definitely a different energy. I think it'll be. I mean, you were there on the last day of the season for the Everton game. I mean, you saw the guys behind the goal at the clock end, the Ashburton Army.
We were in that.
You were in that. Well, there you go.
For the first time, I've sat on the North Bank. I've sat up clock end upper. I've sat right behind the player benches, but I'd never sat clock end lower in the Ashburton Army. And we were this time. And my daughter and her friend who were there, and myself and the guys that I was with, I had a blast the whole time,
Yeah.
man. I mean, that was the closest thing to the way it used to be that I've experienced, and they need more of that.
Yeah, and I think the club are aware that there's a young group of guys there who are fervent Arsenal fans, and they're going to stand up even though it's seated. And
No one told us to sit down. I didn't sit down
Yeah.
the entire game. I forgot there was a seat there. It was
yeah. So ultimately,
there's no flares. I mean, like it's enthusiasm not mixed with that kind of 1970s, 1980s edge that was a little where you felt like something could kick off at any moment.
Yeah. I mean, I think what the club is very aware of is the fact that if people are going to stand, and everybody basically does in the lower tier, they might as well do it in a safe standing environment rather than a slightly unsafe environment, which is standing where there are seats. And obviously, if there are seats, then people are eligible to be slightly annoyed if they can't see because, for whatever reason, they might be small or elderly or what have you. So it definitely makes sense to bring it in. I think they're just going to have a bit of a headache rearranging because not everyone's going to want to stand. So they're going to have to move people and all the rest of it. But, that's the club will figure it out. They'll sort it out. But it'll definitely make for an interesting atmosphere because I think we took it a little bit for granted moving from Highbury to, the Emirates. We just kind of moved over and everybody, the same guys just sat there and mumbled a little bit. Oh, it's not Highbury and we don't really like the new place. And what we've got now is a kind of new generation coming through who are making the Emirates the home for themselves. It's not kind of got the ghosts of Highbury lingering over it. And I've really loved the atmosphere this year and I hope it continues like that for ages.
And I've just caught up on some of the chat that I've missed because I was over in the kind of saved questions area. So Gary, I didn't answer your question because you asked me if it was weird. I got to it when I got to it. So I'm just seeing all these emails about the stadium being sold and not emails, but yeah, the massive surges in the North Bank were unbelievable. You just end up in a different place than you started, and I'll tell you, Dortmund does it right. Dortmund's got that safe seating situation perfectly, exactly where it needs to be, and that's a place to watch a game. But Andrew, I got to cut it off here because I'm taking the evening away from you. The conversation's flowed. I really appreciate you coming on. We'll definitely have to do it again.
It's been great, mate. Thank you so much. It's been, it's always nice to meet someone in the flesh and then get to do something like this. So,
and there was a lot of flesh.
There was
sometimes maybe a little too much flesh, but
that was because you weren't wearing, the right trousers. There were no trousers.
At least I had front full chaps rather than frontless chaps because no one needs to see that.
I'm glad we've been able to maintain this all the way through from DMs into the intro.
Exactly,
it's
like in the industry, it's called a callback. That's what we professionals call it. So anyway, thanks to the chat that's been with us. Stay tuned tomorrow night, a little bit earlier start time, 7 p.m. We're going to have Andrew Mangan, aka Arseblog, on. We'll talk about Andrew Allen for an hour, and see how that goes. And then the following night show, we'll do a recap show of the show that we did the night before, and that's just how we put out content. So anyway, Andrew, where can we find you? Obviously, you've got your Twitter handle on there, but if anyone's listening to this and not watching it, give us your socials.
Yeah, at A Allen Sport, but it's a AALLEN. Am I going to spell it out? I am going to do it. AALLEN Sport. You'll find me. Or you just type in Andrew Allen and you'll get a lovely singer on the Google.
Just put Andrew Arseblog and you'll get right to Andrew Allen as the first thing that comes up, right? There'd be no other combination or
It's amazing, even this far in, how many people still think that we're just one Andrew.
I know somebody that thought that until a couple of days ago. I'm not going to out that person, but yeah,
different people. Yeah,
I mean, and I suppose there are worse things to be.
It just amazes me.
People get me confused with who's the guy that plays Magic Mike in the movies. I mean,
of course, it's the stripping.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it always comes back to nudity and flesh. But yeah, people get us confused all the time. They think we're just one person. Me and
I can see it.
Forget what that actor's name is now, but anyway, thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us in the chat. And I'm not going to play the outro video because I don't want to disturb anyone any further. So everybody have a great night.